nominated writer for Writer of the Year and Research Article of the Year, Carlos Marcano. Carlos, so
Hey,
good to see you.
Nick.
Thanks for being here.
Oh my God, I'm so happy to be here. And I don't like that introduction because that puts so much weight on,
Oh
on your
no,
shoulders,
we're
you know?
just so thrilled
I
for you. We're excited about it. It's so well deserved. We're happy that you're here, and you're going to talk about what got nominated as specs, or how do you prefer to call it?
Yeah, that's fine. Specs.
Beautiful. Well, I want to hear all about it. Take it away, Carlos.
Sure. Thank you, Nick. And this is a big endeavor here after all these amazing presentations that there's been already on PitchCon. And well, specs. Let's get into the nitty gritty with it. Um, this is a new pitching stat sort of. I kind of been developing it for around a year and a half, almost 2 years already. But in its actual inception, it's been for about since the beginning of the last season. So and it's an always evolving thing, so it's always new for sure. Before starting, I just want to say that this is something that could have not been done without the help of Jeff Nicholas and Colin Charles from the data science team. I mean, those guys are amazing. And well, I just want to acknowledge that before starting. So what's expects? Okay, let's start here. I hope I can manage appropriately the slideshow. Bear with me 1 second. Okay.
You got it,
Can,
Carlos. You good?
can you see it?
We can see it. Yeah, you just gotta change the arrows on Streamyard, and then I'll go to the next slide.
Yeah, got it there. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so let's start with the name for sure. SpeX is the Simple Pitch and Estimator Index. And I want to make an emphasis on simple and estimator because the idea behind the specs is to simplify a lot of the stuff that it's already there, the amazing information stats that everyone is going to is using. I mean, this is one of the greatest times ever to be a baseball fan because we have all our information here on the tips of our hands, right? But as much as I love to have a lot of information, we all know that it can be a little daunting and maybe it can makes us a little bit dizzy with an intoxicated. That's a term I love because sometimes too much information can intoxicate. So it go we need to go to the root on how what does it mean to evaluate a picture. As I said, there are thousands of stats. We have the um, venerable ERA. We have K minus BB percentage. We have tons of things, and all the way until um, all the things that we can get in Savant and all the places that we have now, all the specialized places. So it can be a little bit tough. It can be tough to put into perspective what can we use to evaluate a picture. So my thinking behind this is, well, what can we do to simplify this stuff, but because we have and I this is just a very arbitrary way of dividing this stat, but I just wanted to like sectorize and put away on how what are the types of stats that we have on hand and how I see them, right? We have the absolute because they are more or less counting like ERA, Ks, and stuff like that. We even with they we have the relative because they are based on ratios and things like that, like K percentage, PB percentage, all the way to the almighty CSW percentage. All hail CSW percentage, and things like that that we are able to get now, like round ball, line drive, and things like that. We also have the discipline stats first strike, percentage zone, and the such that uh, we have available from later or years on. And then we go to the most advanced things like XFIP, FIP, PCERA, even Sierra, and things like that, all the way to measuring the release points and vertical angles, that things like uh, Alex Chamberlain showed us in this great presentation back a few days, and things like that. So what I did want to do is to, okay, we have all this information. How can we combine of sorts? How can we combine them in a way that we can have a meta index of sort that can help us have a straight indication, at least the first indication of things, and how does is a picture faring, and what's in the future for them, right? So the idea was to simplify but still make it accurate, because we can take things and simplify, but we might lose uh, information in the road to that, right? So what the way I'm going to go into this journey is thinking about what happened when I had this idea, what's happening now with it, and what's going to happen in the future around it, right? So first, what happened? What was the road to SpeX and beyond simplifying, right? So I had this idea of linking together some stats that reflect dominance through force. What does it mean to be dominant by force? Well, strikeouts, basically strikeouts, strikes, swinging strikes, things like that, and their counterpart, walks and balls and those kind of those things. That, of course, it's not all about dominance. There's also command and control there, but most of, especially in this time and this age of baseball, most of the dominance goes with the speed and all the way that these crazy fastballs interact with the between the pitcher and the batters, right? But also, I wanted to have something that proved or could give us success by deception, command and control, things that show how a pitcher that does not necessarily have success by overpowering batters and but using other ways for it, and balancing of this stuff. I had the idea that we needed also an ERA estimator, and in the end, what this means is that mm, we still need something that could help us predict. And there are stats that are mainly descriptive, and there are others that there have been created to be more predictive or are predictive as an second effect or a side effect. And the last part in this road to specs was for sure that, does it describe, does it predict, does it work? And that's usually like the hardest part, because it means doing a lot of testing and before putting it in the wild, and it requires not having or getting blind but the results that you wanted to have, but the actual results that you are getting. So the first part is and regarding the stat that reflect dominance, we have K minus BB percentage and CAW percentage. And I know that I could have a very lengthy talk about it with Alexander Chase and regarding how it should be on PA and things like that. And I'm also Nick and Alex have could give me their nitty gritty on it. But I just wanted like holistic uh, proportion of it, or how do they uh, give us this part. So I chose to use these two stats, K minus B percentage for sure. It's just the ratio of struck outs in terms of the total batters faced. It's an amazing stat by itself. I mean, if you want to do the singles easiest but with the better upside analysis of any pitcher, it in my opinion for sure it all goes to minus BB percentage. It's so deceptively simple that you cannot imagine how useful it can be. It's very descriptive for sure, and but it's also probably as a side effect, who knows, very predictive. uh, Actually, we know it's very descriptive because, for example, here I have all the leaders in this stat since 2017 with at least 450 in pitch. And you can see Chris Sale, Max Scherzer, Jacob DeGrom, Garrett Cole, Justin Verlander, Shane Bieber, Corey Kluber, Clayton Kershaw, and Darvish. I mean, it's like who's who for the past 5 years, right? So we know that this stat it's great to describe performance and how well a pitcher, how good a pitcher is, right? But it also has the effect that if it's very sticky year to year, year on year, and it also has a good correlation with the following years SIERA. I'm going to say Sierra. That's a way I say it in Spanish, and but I hope you know I'm referring to it. Um, Bear with me a little bit on that. And it's most of the testing I've done and I've read online. Sierra has around a 77 correlation to the following years, to next year's as Sierra. So, what does this mean? That it can predict or it can explain, better said, around 67% of next year's Sierra, and that's perfectly logical because Sierra is largely made of strikeouts and walks, besides a lot of other stuff. I mean, the Sierra formula can get you dizzy just looking at it, you know. But some people ask, okay, but why Sierra? Why do you like to check with it? I find it to be one of the best descriptors of a pitcher's ability. And also in testings that I've done, Sierra correlates very well with that same year's F WAR, the Fangraphs version of WAR. So I think that is really good in terms of analyzing a picture. So that's why most of my correlations and testings I do it against it. The other stat is of course CSW percentage. It's the love child of Nick Pollock and Alex Fast, and with the help of Colin Charles and others in pitcher list. And I mean, it's this is the other stat that it's looks so simple, but it's so deceptively simple that I love the way that it can provide description and prediction. It's more granular than the previous one because we go directly to the pitch level. We use cold strikes to strikes and whiffs between total pitches, so we have a more granular um, stage or look here. And in CSW percentage also uh, have good prediction power. On the second part, we have the stats that uh, create success by deception. There's a ton of them. There's thousands of them. Where there, in previous inceptions of SpeX, I used to use first strike percentage and contact percentage among others, and I got good results, but there was not as good as these other two that were originally suggested by Jeff Nicholas, by the way. And O swing percentage, the outside of the zone swing percentage that a pitcher gets, and zone percentage. We have how often the pitcher is inside the zone with his throws, and what we try to, or what we try to achieve here is to have a look of pitchers that depend on location and control and command to be able to survive in on the stage, and they do not necessarily have an overpowering four seamer or any other kind of fastball, but they can locate their pitches in a way that can induce enough waves or strikes to be able to get batters out of their way. So that's something that for me was important to also achieve here. And the third leg of this table is goes to the ERA estimators. We have a good quantity of ERA estimators. There's FIB, XFIB, Sierra, Deserved ERA, XERA, PCRA. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them, and they all have their particularities, and they all have their characteristics, and they can be used better in some situations than others. What I did is I did a lot of testing with them. Introduced uh, one by one of them into the formula and the weighting and scaling and all of this. I tended to use Sierra first, and it was good. But then, when I started writing with the six-man rotation, I was introduced to the fabulous work of Connor Karkin, and which is, in my opinion, one of the brightest minds in baseball, and he took this concept of adding the a battle ball event known as barrels that we all know into the estimator, and it just clicked like a wonder, and he created this PCRA estimator, which is one of the best estimators of ERA that you can find. So I did testing with it, and unsurprisingly, it helped a lot into the formula. The great thing about PCRA, as I said, it's like an XFIB with an added hard hit component, which are the barrels, right? And what what I find interesting is that uh, it balances so well the whole. It's like a wrapper around the formula that it makes it way better. PCRA has also a great correlation to next year's Sierra, so it's around 67%. So that's all very good. So after all the testing and all the number crunching that Jeff did, we got this formula. I'm not going to bore you with the mathy or each part of it. It's just I wanted to highlight the four components we have in blue. K minus BB percentage, and green CSW percentage, which is the force part. We have the deception part in red with the O swing percentage and zone. And we have the error estimator in the middle in orange, which is the it's around PCRA. And what this formula does is weight and scales, and we get a number from 1 to 100. And the idea behind all this scaling and weighting is to avoid some multicollinearity and inflation. So well, that's some mathy stuff, but it tries. It's like to try to avoid to step in on into each other's toes between the elements of the form. And this is like a representation of how do they each element weigh. Mostly PTC rates around 55% of the formula, and the rest has all its part. This way you can see, because sometimes people ask me, okay, but what is it taking more into account? And this is more or less the way that it's split, you know. And as I said, it's a scale from 0 to 100. But of course, last year Jacob de Grom broke it, and I got the first ever more than 100 grade for a pitcher there. Uh, Starting pitcher, I mean, because relievers with less innings pitch, they tend to also get higher scales. I'll get into that in a little bit. And the idea is that usually 75 is a good threshold to look for pitchers that could be into something. So beyond 75, it's usually good. More in speed is better, of course, and it tends to stabilize around the sixth to seventh um, start, around 30 pitch. This doesn't mean that you can't gauge relief pitchers this way. Of course not. But it I have to admit that it works better with a starting pitcher, because as usually the bigger the sample, the better, and more innings pitch are going to help to have, of course, the bigger sample. When looking at the results of how good specs could work, well, I continue doing the correlation with the following year's Sierra. Based on rankings and tires, what does this means is that I want it to be helpful in terms of tiring starting pitchers. So I know that some segments on the top will be my tire one, tire two will come later in another scale, in among the pictures and things like that. So because that I believe that's more useful for the regular user, in terms that you can divide your pictures and target depending on these tires. And in our testing, we found that the CSW percentage had a great, almost 60% correlation with the next year's Sierra. PCRA and K minus BB percentage were all tied around 65%, and specs over was a little bit better in terms of 67%. And I could understand that it looks like there's really little margin there. I mean, just 2.2 percentage points. Yes, that's true. And but the thing is, and this is, I don't know if we can watch it properly here in this graph, but this is something that I like to check too. What this means is that we are not only getting a better correlation from specs, but we are also getting a smaller error. So that means that it can be a little bit more accurate than the other stats. And that's important, because what happens is that I can be, this is like command and control. I can have good command but bad control, or vice versa. What I was aiming is that, yes, I want a good correlation, but I want also a good mean error, could have been absolute or root mean. And this was achieved in our testing. We got it right that way. And I mean, that was really exciting when we got these results at the moment, right? So what does that mean in practical terms? And this is where what everyone would would ask in terms of, okay, how good is it beyond those crazy numbers and things like that no one cares about. um, well, we after this, I did when we got the final model and the final formula. I put it into test, and on March last year, I wrote an article, putting into the wild and doing some predictions in terms of what could specs achieve and help us with. I also got the great help from Mara McElroy, my manager at the time, and Picture List, who is an amazing guy. And we got these results, and two of the best, or the biggest hits that I got with the specs is you could get Corbin Burns and Kevin Gossman so discounted, but still performing at the SP1. And that's one of the main things that I love about it, that you can find this kind of players, and it can give you a lead in to them to them. And I mean, you can get there in other ways, but just looking at a single number, it could simplify and give us more time to do other kinds of digging, and that's what I wanted to achieve. We also got the good expectations of Musgrove, Goodrow, Ubaldi, Tyler Malley, and plenty of others. It got some misses, sure. I'm putting Nola and Castillo there with a question mark, because Castillo improved a lot in the final season, in the final months of the season. So it was kind of bittersweet, the result with him, because he was atrocious the first couple of months of the year. And Nola, yes, he was less than what we were expecting from him, and I would say he was a mean. Tristan McKenzie was like the bigger deception there, but I think there were a lot of other situations around him that kind of yeah, make the decision around him noisier. But the hits were overwhelmingly more than the misses, to be honest. And let's be real, we're not going to get everything right during the season. There's, as we already know, baseball is a game where random stuff and the luck has a lot to do with our final results, right? But I'm just going to quote. This was from the article in March last year. Names of history interest for this year: Burns, Gosman, Musgrove, Glasnow, and Mackenzie. Glasnow unfortunately got hurt, but he was on his way to have a great season. I forgot to add him here to this slide. And this something that I did not mention. This was using the specs results for 2020. And 2020, I don't need to go too deep into that, but it provided a real problem with every analysis because of the shortened season, and we didn't have enough data sometimes. And as I said earlier, the more the, if we had more in a speech, it works better for our specs results. So what I did also was I put together 2019 and 2020, so we could have a bigger sample there, and the results were pretty much similar. It already, and let me quote from the article after for the 2019 2020 chart: names of interest: Woodruff, Morton, Nola, Gosman, Scherzer, Snell, and all the ones that we have here: Burns, Gosman, Giolito, Lynn, even Flaherty, who did not have the greatest season, but he was hurt, and there were a lot of things there going on that were out of our control of most stuff, right? Um, it already pointed that Knowledge should have had a better season that he had in Castillo. So that's why I'm putting there in putting them there in the misses. But for sure, the hits were a lot more than the misses at that point, right? So that's the past. That's the way uh, Specs fared in the past, and I think that looking at the evidence, it fared pretty well, and of course, it still needs to put things in context. This is not a catch it all solution. There is no such thing. I believe so, but as an the initial step into looking into pictures, I think it's a pretty handy tool. In season use during 2021, I think that was one of the biggest uh, good things that Specs is good for, and because using Specs in season help get to go into pictures like Logan Webb, Alex Cobb, Luis Garcia, that were for sure mm, doing better than what the eye met at the beginning of the season. I mean, of course, then we saw that what they were able to accomplish, and but if you were doing fab or looking on the waiver wire, and as we all do, looking for these hidden jewels, you could easily uh, find this kind of pictures doing better than they were presenting us daily. And one way of doing that, and that's the way I like to use it in season, is looking at their trend. How was their specs at the beginning of the season? How about 2 weeks later? How was it trendy? For example, here we have Logan Webb and Alex Cobb and Luis Castillo. And they have a steady, slight upwards trend in terms of their specs. That meant that there was growing space. They were improving, maybe a little slower than they should have, but they were improving. And that's something that we can use in our favor. So looking at for example, Logan Webb, I mean, he was doing so well. He ended the year as an ace, but at the beginning we had our doubts. I was lucky enough to look at this trend and grab in a bunch of leagues, and I also, well, if you get into my Twitter feed, I think I was spamming everyone around Logan Web, and of course you're not gonna hit everything that in the waiver wire, but if you can hit a Logan Web during the in-season managing of your league, it's gonna give you a tremendous edge, for sure, for sure. It also showed that Luis Castillo was going to improve. He was doing atrocious at the beginning. This chart here only goes until June, mid-June. So this was the beginning of the season, and yes, Castillo, as you can see, it's the yellow line. He was underperforming crazily, but he was going in a steady growth, and that's what we want to look for. Um, I tend to do weekly accumulated SpeX analysis, but there's something I'm putting in the weekly updated chart, which by the way I update this chart every week. I usually try to do it twice a week. If you want to take a look at it, it's my Twitter profile at CA Marcano. I can see Michael Guvia is doing some spamming on my behalf there. Thanks, Michael. And yeah, in my bio, that you can find the link to this spreadsheet with which I do. I try to keep it constantly updated. And there, one thing that I found helpful was to put season specs, last 30 days specs, and 15 last 15 days specs, and I put them together, and that way you can see the trends easily. You can see, okay, the guy it's just underperforming for the season, but you can see the trend for the last 15 and 30 days. So that way you can in a snap see how is he trending, if he's going in the right or in the wrong way. I'm planning to add the weekly accumulated specs for this year's season. I would love to have more time to work on this kinds of stuff, but I plan to have it probably by the end of mid to end February. So the idea is to have more tools, helpful tools that everyone can look at them. And I know that the no one wants to go to the math part. We would just want a single number and things like that can help us. So I'm trying to go that way with the spreadsheet and the chart, and I'm even doing a data studio chart. It's like a tableau or of sorts that can give us a better and easier graphical representation of it. So as the most famous words in picture list say, what's happening now? And what about 2022? So I've already done some checks for 2022, not as much as I should. I have not started a single draft this year and planning on February, but using specs as a tool for my pitching staff, what I usually do and how do I plan to use it for next season is looking for pitchers with with specs higher than 70. I know I said earlier that 75 was like the good threshold for it, but if the pitcher is already going beyond 70, might mean that they are improving, and sometimes these improvements doesn't go from one day to the other. So 70 is fine, and always looking for interesting season, last 30 days, last 15 days splits, and especially checking for mismatches between ADPs and specs. I cannot tell you the times that I've seen that pitcher is going really with an ADP of on the 300, 400s, and it doesn't match his specs number, and that's pretty much weird. That's something that happened with Kevin Gausman and last year and 2020. Um, his ADP was higher than it should have been, and Specs said that he was going into the SP1 tire, but he was still getting drafted in later rounds. And even Corbin Burns, famously, Corbin Burns was part of my TGFBI team, and I famously left him on the bench, but who cares? And he was my SP1, and I got him at a really discounted price, and the return of investment there was just crazy, even with the lesser amount of inning pitch that he got last year. So these are the things that we should check, these mismatches, right? So what's in the front view for the pitching panorama in 2022? So just from the start, there are a couple of guys like Nola, Gosman again, And Nola again. I'm double. I'm going double down on Nola this year. I think Nola. We all know he's has the material to be an SP1, and right now his price point in terms of ADP is really nice. If we can get him into that tier, and for the pricing that he's now, the return would be great. Guzman is still underappreciated in my opinion, and we have pitchers like Tanner Hawk that, my God, I wish Boston could give him the chance to pitch every day. Well, every sixth day, and because I believe Tanner Hook's potential is just on the it's just too good to not have him pitching as frequently as possible. And then there is Alex Wood, who should also, if health permits, he should be extremely good. We also have Rodriguez, well, he was from Boston. Oh my God, I forgot his first name. My Venezuelan fellow. And I just put Zach Eflin there because if Zach Waxman is listening, he's going to be this year's Robbie Race. That's half kidding. But unfortunately, he's hurt, and we don't know if he's going to pitch until May, I believe. But he could have a great season too. So back at it, I went and looked for good cost and value opportunities here. This doesn't mean this is the only way to use it. Of course, if I think I didn't mention school. I'm sorry for that. SpeX is a natural five tool. Thank you, Blair. Um, I'm not that big into school. I'm sorry, but as I was saying, this is not the only way. Of course, we can confirm if we are going all the way in with guys like Liam Hendricks, and because we can also use it with relief pitchers that if they had enough innings pitch last year, like Hendricks and Raisel Iglesias, who, I mean, if I'm just going briefly into relief pitching, I think Iglesias should be like, well, the top guy out of the board, in my opinion, for saves. The guy has got it so well adjusted into his role, and he is performing, and it looks like he will continue performing at the top level for the following season. What's going to happen with the specs? And this is the revamping part of um, the specs and the spec stat. And the as everything can be improved, we know the specs uses a good quantity of stats, and but we know of the even that the results are great, we always have to question ourselves, right? And I have to admit that there were some semi-arbitrary choices made around it, and they are performing well, and I like that. I love that. But there is always a more scientific approach to things, and I like to do it that way. There are behaviors that could be overlooked. Ground ball pitchers, fastball pitch, fly ball pitchers, and the law. And the starting pitch, relief pitch line is still kind of fuzzy, and also age is not a factor into the formula. It's not factored into the formula. So all these things are not factored into the formula. So and I need to repeat, it's not a catch-it-all solution. So we need always to keep things in context, and we cannot just be blinded by it. It part of a good process is looking at everything, right? I just wanted something that I could use for my first approach. So what I'm doing now, and I've been doing for a while, is creating a new model. I'm using some machine learning for it, and I'm increasing the sample size of the data I'm using, and also evaluating what stats to use. And with modeling, and so more. And the previous results that I've gotten are really encouraging. I started using 30 different stats. Um, just let's think about it. I'm going from 5 to 30. And after this, I've been using more than 20 plus different kinds of models, all kinds of regressions and classifications and things, really geeky and nerdy stuff, hyper tuning, and making the most out of these models. And what I found in my initially is that using a lasso regression model, which is very helpful because it kinds of can nullify the terms or stats that are not very helpful for the model. Uh, I found that using these stats like PCRA, age, BABIP, Granville percentage, even Sierra and games started just to make, because the problem with the specs right now is that it can uh, give a lot of weight to release pictures because of the reduced sample. So games started. It's a way of balancing this, and these initial inputs have given me some good information. And the model right now, in the initial testings, it's getting to around at 74% of correlation, with an improved to correlation to the following year's Sierra, and an improved median absolute errors. I don't know if you guys remember that we were talking. I don't only want the correlation to improve. I also want the errors to get better and better, and that means to be smaller. And right off the bat, they are working like that, and it's very encouraging. What's in my wish list of things to do? I want to do some model stacking, and I've been trying different. That's a different technique of machine learning, and but the thing that I would like the most to do with it is to merge with a workload model. I'm also working on that, and this is adding more advanced stuff from StatCast, like total pictures, velocities, even release extension. I didn't think that it would help or be in a part into a workload model. I found in the initial testing that it has some relation to it. So this is something I want to achieve at some point. I don't know when, to be honest, but I'd love to merge the specs model with the workload model of sort, so it could be more integral. I'm not saying that the way the specs works today is bad. Not at all. Actually, having a close to 70% correlation with in the following year, right? Something that for baseball, it's really good. And the way it works right now, it still gives you an edge in that regard. But I want to improve it more and more, and make it more. I want things to be repeatable enough to be extremely useful. So that's something I'm working on, and I believe that before the season starts, we should have some results in that regard, and the corresponding article with the updated version of specs. Right now, the workload model are also this is something I would like to release in at some point, and it's already giving me some interesting numbers. So I don't want to give these results because I don't want to be on the record then yet, but you should be stay tuned because there could be something in the following weeks around it. So finally, and I think I'm almost on time. This is something funny that I read from, well, probably Neil Sport, but there is no consensus around it. That prediction is very difficult, especially about the future. This sounds something like Yogi Berra would say about. I think, and this is we try too much on predicting, and we underestimate how hard it is to do this, and I we have to be thankful for all the amazing analysts out there that are putting so much work and doing so much stuff trying to help us uh, to be lighter on our own analysis. And this is a great age to play and watch baseball and to be a baseball fan, because there's so much at our disposal that we should be grateful around it. Um, I think we have a few minutes for questions. I saw that, for example, someone asking if I think a bunch of career average players are going to repeat the same success from 22 to 23. I think if you might be talking about Gassman and Nola, I think maybe, or maybe Gossman specifically. But I'm a Gossman truther. I think he the guy just clicked and he's on beast mode from now on. I know that going out of San Francisco is a downgrade for him in terms of the park, but I'm really confident that he's going to fare very well on over there. Neil Spore understands me. Yeah, I bet he does, Blur. Pretty much this is specs and everything around it, and all the things that it means. I'm pretty excited of the future about it, because this little, you know, thing of mine that started really little has grown, and one of the things I love the most, it's reading on Twitter's people doing um, decisions using it, and that just makes me very happy, because at the end what we want is to be helpful for you guys. Where do I find this information? You could go, yeah, you could check it on my Twitter bio. It's you could go to at CA Marcano. Yeah, that's right, as Michael shows there. And in my bio, you will find the spreadsheet where it's all about it, and there are links to the picture list article with all the information on it. And yes, I'll keep updating it as much as possible, and if my wife and kids let me. I try to do it twice a week. So
Carlos, that was amazing, man. And all it makes me think is like, man, we got to talk at some point in the next month or so. We got to get it on the site. I don't want you to have to update this stuff. We have enough data that we should be able to figure this out so that we can have a leaderboard of it and everything up on the site. Really awesome work with it. Like, it's such a cool idea. How? I guess my biggest question is you showed it at the end there, well, on the end, kind of in the middle, a big formula for it. 11 times K minus walk, and I kind of want to ask, like, how did you come up with those exact numbers?
So in his inception, it was all Jeff Nicholas' idea on how to weight in and scale.
Mm-hmm.
He at that moment I was really a neophyte in terms of data crunching and things like that.
Sure, yeah.
So he took me by the hand. Okay, let's try to weight it in a way, and it was he did regressions around it, and so that's how he found the constants for each one of the
Mm-hmm.
terms. So, and then just there's a scaling to take it from 1 to 100 to make it simpler and straightforward to read it.
Right. Yeah. That's the tough part. That's the crazy part. Jeff Nicholas,
Yeah,
amazing. He's our data science team manager right now.
yeah,
Colin Charles, you also mentioned. I mean, he's been here for years. I have all the respect in the world for Colin Charles.
sure.
An amazing guy, and yeah, helped a lot with CSW, for example. And also actually has a cool article coming out about CSW in the next couple weeks, something along those lines. And there was one other thing I wanted to mention was that I thought it was really cool. I never, I saw it before last year when I read it, and it just slipped my mind, and it reminded me again of it. O swing plus Z plus zone rate. I think is an interesting way of framing it. Because at first I was like, oh, you're right. Isn't that just essentially strike percentage? But it's not, because that would imply that
No.
there are 50 balls and 50 strikes. Like, it's uneven.
Yeah,
And combining the two, I've never really seen people do that before. I'm kind of
yeah,
curious to see if there's more that we can pull back about combining those two. I thought it was really cool.
yeah. That's because sometimes we tend to just look at the fastballs and all the
Right.
power stuff, and we tend to not get into the guys, the Marco Gonzalez, the Kyle Hendricks of the world,
Hmm.
those guys that make a living out of uh, being always in the zone, but also getting
The
guys
bad
to,
contact. Right.
yeah, the bad contact and making people swing out of the zone. So
Right.
it was a little bit empirical at the beginning, but
Hmm.
then when we plugged it into the formula, it was like it made completely sense,
That's
So
wild. That's so cool. But yeah, we gotta figure out a way to get this so that you don't have to update this yourself. Oh my god. We gotta get everybody seeing. I mean, look what we did with CSW, right? Fast was doing it, having the updated one, and then we put it on the site. I bet we can make it work.
that's cool.
Um,
That sounds cool.
and but Carlos,
I'm
really,
all,
thank you.
I'm all for working less.
Yeah, there you go. Um, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And good luck, man. You're nominated for an FSWA in both Research Article of the Year talking about specs, and of course as Baseball Writer of the Year. So we're all gonna be cheering
Thank
for
you.
you, man.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, everyone. And it was a great opportunity. So thanks for it.
Absolutely. All right.